Welcome back to the Wealth Guardian Show, guarding your retirement from market losses with safe money strategies. And we mean that. That's just not a cutesy phrase. We were talking about REITs, and basically REIT, R-E-I-T, is a real estate investment trust. And basically, in a nutshell, what that is just a collection of commercial properties kind of packaged together, and where when you invest into a REIT, you're basically given money for them to purchase these properties, and you share in the profits. And, of course, you also share in the losses as well. So that's something we want to make, get clear with you. We never were clear on in the last segment exactly what a REIT is. Some of you already know, some of you don't. But the most simplest form is just a collection of commercial properties where when you invest in them, your money's pulled to purchase these properties. And in a nutshell, you just share in those profits. Is that about right?
That's perfect, and I appreciate you. We got a little ahead of ourselves there. I apologize. Yes, that's exactly what it is, and great definition. That can be multi-use, multifamily housing. It can be strip malls. It can be Class A office buildings. The biggest ones I've seen going around with the people I've met with over the last couple of years have been very nice Class A office buildings. And they got beautiful pictures, beautiful brochures. It looks very attractive, and I'm telling you, you've got to get a third-party person or evaluation of what's really going on these things. And we're going to talk about why.
Well, they're talking about commercials. The next bubble, housing's on popped. And they're talking commercials, so obviously that's something why you should think about it. Another thing, if you want to participate today, that number is 800-642-0060. You can get on our show, 800-642-0060. You may have questions about what we're talking about today or just a question in general about your finances. And once again, if you want to meet with Doug, myself, or Paul, that number is 800-515-2919. We have offices Raleigh, Greensboro, Winston, Charlotte. Go out to the mountains.
Lake Norman.
Thank you. Pretty much when I say Charlotte, I almost feel like I'm talking about Lake Norman. They're so close. But
there's South Charlotte, too.
Yeah, and there is South Charlotte. Don't forget that as well. South Carolina, feel free to drive up. Doug will come see you. No.
They do drive up.
800-515-2919. Give us a call. Be happy to sit down with you. It doesn't cost you a cent to sit down with us and kind of take a look at our strategies. And once again, if you want to get on the show, 800-642-0060. Give us a call.
Absolutely. Give us a call even if you have a real estate investment trust question today. But the reason we're doing this show today is I recently met with a family who I'm now working with and has become a client. And they were allowing us to help us with their investments. And I'll go over their actual example of the estate in detail later on in the show. Anyways, this client had a REIT out of New York, and I don't want to give the name of the company, but it's a well-known company, and this REIT was paying 8%. Now, Doug and Brian, I immediately knew this payout was not typical, and I needed to do some detailed research on this. The 8% seemed too high for the industry standard and the industry average, and I was hoping that it was not paying back some of their actual principal. But I went to a book I paid for called Blue Vault, and it pulled the information up. In their particular their particular REIT was a non-marketable REIT. Doug and Brian, you know what we discovered?
What's that?
We discovered that on these REITs, this particular one actually was earning a dividend and only worth paying about 3%. So in other words, they were paying the clients 8%, but yet the income from the actual real estate investment trust was only 3%.
So basically, they're giving back their money.
How long can they continue to do that? I mean, this is property. This is real property. I mean, you can't, sell it off and give back principal that easily, can you?
Almost has a Ponzi undertone.
It really, and that's what it basically is. I mean, when you are doing these things, and I'm a little upset at the way that the reporting goes because a lot of your brokerage statements are still reporting $10 per par value, but yet, you have a 15% upfront fee, and then in addition to that, they're paying back part of your principal.
Well, that's kind of like the old Ginnie Maes and Fannie Maes. I mean, those paid back principal, and people didn't realize it, and all of a sudden, the value of their Ginnie Mae was going down, down, down.
Exactly. So I went to the Blue Vault, and I've got the numbers right here in front of me on their particular one. Now, these folks had $500,000 in this REIT for income.
Wow.
Okay. Now their total portfolio was only a little over $900,000, but they had $500,000. Actually, I'm sorry, it's $1.2 million.
On the face value, you can see why they would do that, though.
Yeah, because it looked good. Hey, we'll
it's
give you
$40,000 a year. That's total interest. They're thinking that when the truth is they're getting back $25,000 a year of their own money.
Well, speaking of that, Paul, how was it taxed? I mean, was the whole 8% 1099 to them or what?
Well, it's hard to tell how it's being taxed. Now, part of theirs was in an IRA, obviously, so none of it was being taxed. But with some of the taxations, you do get depreciation from the real estate. But that's deceptive because they're thinking they're getting a lot of depreciation when, in fact, they're getting part of their principal back on that. And obviously they're not getting taxed on that portion of the principal that's being paid back. But this particular REIT just closed. Now, this is one thing you've got to understand. On non-marketable REITs, the government passed a rule about 18 months ago. On non-marketable REITs, once you close, which means no new investors can come into it, you have to have an appraisal done. Okay? So that's something the feds just passed, and the reason is because people were being deceived. Now, let me explain the numbers of this $500K that was invested in here. It paid them $120,000 over the last 3 years. Okay? Now, that sounds great, doesn't it?
Sounds great if it was all interest.
Well, let's dig in this a little bit. $75,000 of this was actual principal paid back, and the clients didn't even know it.
So they thought they still had a value of $500,000.
That is correct.
And that's what's showing up on their statement.
That's what's showing up on their statement. That's what I want people out there.
And why would you not think that?
Exactly. Okay. Now, only $45,000 of this was true income, and which was earned by the company. And this is very much like we talked about earlier, being something like a Ponzi scheme. When we looked at this in detail, we discovered we could get out of the REIT at the end of 3 years. And so basically, when I met with the clients, I said, would you rather get out of this Ponzi type scheme and get your full principal out now, and get out at the beginning of it rather than the end of it? Be the first one out rather than the last one out. So they're able to get out after 3 years. They were able to get out of this thing with their full $500,000, even though they paid back how much of
$120.
Even though they paid out $75,000 of their own principal, and so we obviously jumped all over that and they listened, thank God, because once again, not because of me, but we had a third party through a company called Blue Vault that did an actual analysis and study showing the year-to-date distributions paid and the year-to-date funds from operation. So, like on this particular REIT, I have it right in front of me. The distributions paid were $54 million, but yet the fund operation only brought in $37 million. It's clear as a bell. So. And that's what we can do for you on your non-marketable REITs.
Well, let me ask you something, Paul. How is the average person going to look at their statement and, A, know if they've got a marketable or a non-marketable REIT, and then, B, have any idea whether or not this thing is paying back principal?
Well, you can't. You really, you can easily tell from a non-marketable, marketable, and we'll talk about that when we get back from break, but you cannot know whether or not it's paying back principal unless you get this third-party report.
All right, man, good stuff. I'm glad you brought that up today.
No
All
doubt.
right, we're going to go out for the bottom of the hour break, and we'll be back in just a few short minutes with more Wealth Guardians.